The dining room was enormous. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over a table set with more dishes and silverware than I'd ever seen. I found myself seated between Eleanor and a charming older gentleman who turned out to be a retired ambassador. "Margaret helped me today," Eleanor announced to our section of the table as food was served. She demonstrated exactly the kind of practical wisdom and selflessness that built the foundations of success. "How wonderful," said the ambassador's wife. "It's so refreshing to meet someone who actually does something helpful instead of just talking about it." Throughout dinner, Eleanor kept bringing me into conversations about everything from volunteer work to my late husband's carpentry business. She seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking thoughtful questions that made me feel like my experiences mattered. "Your husband sounds like he was a remarkable man," she said when I mentioned how he taught neighborhood kids woodworking skills for free. "Building things, teaching skills, helping others succeed. That's real legacy." But I also noticed that Amanda kept glancing at her father with worry, and Richard's jaw grew tighter each time Eleanor praised me. Something was building toward a confrontation, and I had the uncomfortable feeling I was about to be caught in the middle of it. After dinner, Eleanor suggested we move to the library for coffee. The room was magnificent. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, leather chairs around a massive fireplace, oil paintings of stern-looking ancestors watching from fancy frames. "This is where the real conversations happen," Eleanor confided as she settled into a chair, away from the formal dining room. The smaller group that joined us included Richard, his wife Patricia, Amanda, David, and a few family friends. I noticed James Morrison positioned himself where he could observe everything. "Mother," Richard began carefully, "it's been a lovely evening, but perhaps we should discuss the business reports tomorrow." "Actually, I've been reviewing those," Eleanor interrupted smoothly. "Quite concerning, actually." Amanda and Richard exchanged a quick glance that made my internal alarm go off. Something was definitely happening here. "The company's doing well," Richard continued defensively. "Strong profits, steady growth. The changes I made have been very successful." "Financially successful, yes," Eleanor replied calmly. "But we seem to have lost sight of our founding values. When was the last time Whitman Industries contributed meaningfully to the community that built our success?" "Mother, helping the community is expensive. It's not necessary for business." "It's not unnecessary, Richard. It's our responsibility." Eleanor stood and walked to a portrait near the fireplace. It showed a woman in her 40s wearing a simple but elegant dress from many years ago. She had Eleanor's face and the same intelligent blue eyes. "This is me in 1969, Eleanor said calmly. "The year I started Whitman Industries with a small loan and a rented storefront." The room went very quiet. I stared at the portrait, then at Eleanor, my mind racing. "I was 23 years old, a young mother with big dreams and bigger determination," she continued. "Everyone told me that women couldn't build successful businesses. Instead of listening, I decided to prove them wrong." Amanda looked pale. "Grandmother, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I built this company from nothing. Every contract, every expansion, every success came from my vision, my decisions, my willingness to work long hours and solve problems other people couldn't solve." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Mother, we all know you were instrumental in the early days." "Not instrumental, Richard. Foundational. I didn't help build Whitman Industries. I am Whitman Industries." Her voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Your grandfather Harold was a wonderful husband and father, but he was a high school teacher. The business success came entirely from my work." She turned to look directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made my breath catch. Margaret reminded me today of who I used to be, who I still am underneath decades of letting others take credit for my work. Someone who solves problems and helps people no matter how it looks to others. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about dinner conversation. This was about power, family history, and people who had forgotten where they came from. Eleanor Whitman wasn't just Amanda's grandmother. She was the founder, the source of everything, and she was about to remind everyone exactly what that meant. You built the entire company yourself, I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. Not your husband, you. Eleanor smiled. Smart woman. Yes, I built Whitman Industries from scratch. Harold was a wonderful man and supportive husband, but the business was entirely mine. The silence in the room was complete. Amanda looked like she might faint. But everyone always talks about Grandfather Whitman's business legacy, David said, his voice confused. The founding vision, the family tradition. I let people assume Harold had built the company because it was easier in those days, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. A woman-owned business faced extra problems. Discrimination from suppliers, resistance from clients. It was simpler to let Harold be the public face while I did the actual work. Richard's face had gone from pale to red. Mother, you can't just... Can't what? Tell the truth about my own company. Eleanor's voice carried decades of authority. Remind my family that their privilege came from a woman who understood the value of hard work and treating people with dignity. She moved to stand behind my chair, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder. Today, Margaret demonstrated the exact qualities that built this family's fortune. Practical problem-solving, willingness to sacrifice for others, character over appearance. Qualities that seem to have gotten lost along the way. Amanda found her voice. Grandmother, this is hardly fair. We can't all be car repair experts. It's not about car repair, Amanda. Eleanor's tone was patient but firm. It's about values. When faced with a choice between helping someone in need and protecting your own comfort, what do you choose? The weight of her words settled over the room. I thought about every interaction I'd had with this family over the past 3 years. Every dismissive comment, every subtle insult, every time I'd been made to feel like I wasn't good enough. Margaret has been part of this family for 3 years, Eleanor continued. 3 years of being treated like an inconvenience. Like her values don't matter. Like David made some kind of mistake marrying into our family instead of the other way around. That's not, Amanda started. Isn't it? Eleanor's eyebrows rose. When was the last time you invited Margaret to anything beyond required holidays? When did you last ask about her life, her interests, her well-being? David looked devastated. I tried to encourage more inclusion, but you let it slide because confronting it was uncomfortable, Eleanor said gently. That's human nature. David, but it's not acceptable. She walked to a big desk in the corner and picked up a thick folder. James has been helping me prepare for this conversation for several months, she said. I've been planning to take back a more active role in company operations. Richard shot to his feet. Mother, the company is running perfectly fine. Financially, yes. Ethically, no. Eleanor's smile was sharp. We've become exactly what I never wanted, a business that cares more about profit than people. The room erupted in shocked voices. But Eleanor held up her hand for silence. Margaret, she said, turning to me with eyes that sparkled with purpose. I have a proposal for you. I'd like to offer you a job with Whitman Industries, Eleanor said calmly, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of her family's Christmas party. Head of Community Engagement and Values Implementation. We'll start with a 6-month trial at $75,000, with the potential for a permanent position if things work out. I'm pretty sure my jaw actually dropped. Around the room, I could see similar expressions of shock. Eleanor, I managed. I don't understand. It's quite simple. Whitman Industries has lost touch with the community values that made us successful. You understand people, Margaret. You help without being asked, solve problems without complaining, and treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their social status. She opened the folder and pulled out several papers. I've been planning this restructuring for months, but I needed to find the right person to help make it happen. Today confirmed what I'd hoped, that you have the character and instincts we need. This is insane, Richard burst out. Mother, you can't just create positions based on car repair skills. Eleanor's gaze was icy. Richard, under your leadership, our employee satisfaction has dropped significantly. Our community involvement has disappeared, and our charitable giving has fallen to the legal minimum. Margaret represents exactly what we need to reconnect with our values. She turned back to me. The position would involve developing community partnerships, overseeing our corporate responsibility programs, and helping create a more human-centered workplace culture. You'd work directly with me, at least initially. My head was spinning. 6 hours ago, I'd been worried about fitting in at a family party. Now I was being offered a chance to reshape how a major company worked. But I have no experience in corporate consulting. I protested. You have experience in what matters most, caring about people and solving real problems, Eleanor said firmly. The business skills can be learned. The character cannot. Following Eleanor's car up the long driveway, I tried to process what had just happened. I'd stopped to help a stranger and discovered she was the grandmother of the family I'd been trying to impress for 3 years. After all my preparation, all my worry about making the right impression, I was arriving exactly as I was. Messy, dirty, and completely real. The house rose up in front of us like something from a fairy tale. Christmas lights outlined every window. I could see elegant people moving through the big rooms inside. A young man came to take our cars. Mrs. Whitman, we weren't expecting you for another hour. Your driver called to say the roads were too dangerous. I decided to drive myself, she said simply. So that explained it. Her driver had cancelled because of the weather, but Eleanor had decided to come anyway. That's why she had been stuck. I caught my reflection in a mirror by the door and cringed. My makeup was mostly gone. My hair hung in wet strings. The grease stains on my dress were even more obvious under the bright lights. Eleanor, Amanda's mother, came down the grand staircase, then stopped when she saw me. And Margaret. How unexpected. The way she said unexpected made it clear she meant unfortunate. Margaret helped me with car trouble, Eleanor explained calmly. Quite cleverly, actually. Amanda appeared from another room, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her smile froze when she saw how I looked. Oh my goodness, Margaret, what happened to you? Before I could answer, David rushed over. I could see the embarrassment and concern on his face. Mom, are you okay? You look like you've been in an accident. I'm fine, honey. I just stopped to help someone with car trouble. You could have called for help, Amanda said, sounding annoyed. Now you'll need to clean up before meeting everyone. The main room fell quiet as we entered. Conversations stopped. Everyone turned to stare at the messy woman who had somehow made it into their fancy party. I felt every stare, every raised eyebrow, every whispered comment. This was exactly what I'd feared. Being judged and found not good enough. Amanda leaned close to David, but her whisper was loud enough for others to hear. David, this is embarrassing. Everyone's staring. Maybe she should go home and change. Come back later. But before David could respond, Amanda's father stepped forward. Margaret, he said coldly, how good of you to join us. Though perhaps you'd be more comfortable if you left to get cleaned up. We'd completely understand. The message was clear. I wasn't welcome looking like this. Maybe I wasn't welcome at all. I felt my face turn red with shame. I was about to excuse myself when Eleanor's voice cut through the awkward silence. Actually, Richard, I think everyone should hear about Margaret's good deed before she changes clothes. Eleanor's tone was mild, but something in it made the entire room pay attention. After all, kindness is so rare these days. And that's when I realized Eleanor Whitman was about to turn this humiliation into something else entirely. Margaret didn't just help me with car trouble. Eleanor announced to the silent room. She sacrificed her appearance at this party to make sure I wasn't left alone in dangerous weather. That's the kind of character we should be celebrating. I stood there dripping on their expensive rug, feeling like everyone was examining me under a microscope. But Eleanor wasn't finished. How many of you would have stopped? She continued, her sharp blue eyes scanning the faces around the room. How many would have chosen helping a stranger over making a good impression? The silence was loud. Mother, Richard began. But Eleanor held up one hand. I'm not finished. Richard. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Margaret, would you mind telling everyone exactly what you did to help me? I felt every eye on me. Part of me wanted to disappear, but I was curious to see where Eleanor was going with this. I used Coca-Cola to clean the corrosion off her battery terminals, I said simply. It's an old trick my late husband taught me. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Someone actually laughed. Coca-Cola, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully. Practical knowledge used without hesitation to help someone in need. No concern for expensive clothes or perfect hair. Just immediate action to solve a problem. She moved to stand beside me. Despite being 78 years old, she commanded the room easily. That's exactly the kind of thinking that built this family's fortune, she said quietly. The willingness to get your hands dirty when something needs fixing. Amanda stepped forward, her smile tight. Grandmother, perhaps we should let Margaret get cleaned up before. Before what, Amanda? Before she makes us look bad. Eleanor's tone remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. I think Margaret looks exactly like someone who puts helping others before her own comfort. That's quite beautiful, actually. A warmth spread through my chest. For the first time in 3 years, someone in this family was defending me. Now then, Eleanor continued briskly, I believe Margaret deserves to enjoy this party just as she is. After all, being real is so much more valuable than being fake. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. Of course, Mother. Margaret, please make yourself comfortable. But I could see him calculating behind his eyes. Eleanor had just publicly supported me, and he was smart enough to know that opposing her openly would be a mistake. The crowd began to talk again, but I noticed the glances now carried curiosity rather than judgment. Eleanor Whitman had just raised my status with a few carefully chosen words. Thank you, I whispered to her. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw something that looked almost like satisfaction. My dear, we're just getting started. The next hour was strange and wonderful. Word of Eleanor's support spread through the party like wildfire. Suddenly, people who had been avoiding me were introducing themselves and asking about helping Mrs. Whitman. Found myself telling the story multiple times. The freezing rain, the corroded battery, the Coca-Cola solution. Each time I told it, I felt less embarrassed about my appearance. How clever! Exclaimed a woman wearing pearls that probably cost more than my car. I wouldn't have known the first thing about car trouble. David appeared beside me, still looking concerned but also puzzled. Mum, are you sure you're okay? You don't need to stay if you're uncomfortable. Actually, I'm having a lovely time, I said, surprised to realize it was true. Your grandmother-in-law is quite remarkable. She's always been sharp, he said quietly. I've tried to tell Amanda that Grandmother Eleanor isn't as uninvolved as she pretends to be. She notices everything. So David had seen it too. That made me feel slightly better. Amanda joined us, her expression carefully neutral. Grandmother can be very protective of people she likes. Her tone suggested this wasn't necessarily a good thing. Margaret! Eleanor's voice carried across the room. Come, There's someone I'd like you to meet. She led me to a distinguished man in his 60s. This is James Morrison, our family lawyer and longtime friend. James, this is Margaret, the woman I was telling you about. James shook my hand warmly. Eleanor's been praising you highly. Says you have excellent instincts for solving problems. I just helped with a car, I said, confused by all the attention. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most clever, Eleanor said meaningfully. They exchanged a look that seemed to communicate something important. I was missing something. But before I could ask what, dinner was announced. Please leave. You're embarrassing us. Those words hit me like cold water. I was standing in the fanciest house I'd ever seen, wearing my best dress that now had dirt all over it. My hair was wet and messy. My hands were still covered in grease. And my son's mother-in-law was telling me I didn't belong there. But wait. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Margaret, and I'm going to tell you how one simple act of kindness completely changed my life. I'm 64 years old, and I live alone in a small apartment. My husband died 5 years ago, and I get by on a small monthly check from the government. It's enough to pay for food and rent, but not much else. My son David got married 3 years ago to a woman named Amanda. Her family is very, very rich. They live in huge houses, drive expensive cars, and go to fancy parties all the time. From the day I met Amanda, I could tell she didn't like me very much. She would look at my old furniture and shake her head. She would change the subject when I told stories. At their wedding, her mother didn't even call me by my name. She just said, David's mother from the city. When she introduced me to people. After David and Amanda got married, I didn't see them very much. When I did visit, I felt like I was speaking a different language. They talked about country clubs and expensive vacations and business deals. I had nothing to add to those conversations. So when David called me one day with surprising news, I was shocked. Mum, Amanda's family is having their big Christmas party. They want you to come this time. They really want to meet you properly. I couldn't believe it. After 3 years of being kept at a distance, they were finally inviting me in. That's wonderful, I said, even though something felt strange about it. Just maybe wear something nice. David added quietly. You know how they are about looking good. I knew exactly how they were. Every time I saw Amanda, she looked like a model from a magazine. Perfect makeup, perfect hair, perfect clothes. Meanwhile, I shopped at discount stores and cut my own hair to save money. But I said yes. This was my chance. My chance to finally be part of David's new life. My chance to show them I wasn't as bad as they thought. I had no idea that decision would lead to the strangest and most important day of my entire life. For the whole week before the party, I prepared like I was getting ready for the most important test in school. Because in a way, I was. This was my test to see if I could fit into their world. I spent 2 days looking for the right dress. I needed something that looked expensive, but didn't cost a lot of money. Finally, I found a pretty red dress with sparkly beads. It was on sale for $65, down from $200. It wasn't made by a famous designer, but it looked nice. I also bought matching shoes that hurt my feet, and a small purse that went with the dress perfectly. David called me twice that week. Mum, remember that Amanda's family is very traditional. Maybe don't talk about anything controversial. Honey, I've been having conversations my whole life. I think I can manage not to upset anyone. I know, it's just ... Amanda is stressed about this party. She wants everything to go perfectly. Everything. Including me, apparently. The night before the party, I stood in front of my mirror and practiced what to say. How to answer when people asked about my job. How to sound interested in topics I knew nothing about. How to act like I belonged. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, came over to check on me. Big party tomorrow? She asked. The biggest. My son's in-laws are very wealthy and proper. This is my chance to finally become part of their family. Mrs. Chun squeezed my hand. She had moved to America from another country many years ago, so she understood what it felt like to try to fit into a new world. Just be yourself, Margaret. If they don't see how wonderful you are, that's their problem. That being myself hadn't worked for 3 years. Maybe it was time to try being someone they wanted me to be. I went to bed early. Setting my alarm for 8 a.m., I had planned everything perfectly. Hair appointment at 10 a.m. Pick up the dress at noon. Arrive at the party at 2:15 p.m. as I fell asleep. I imagined how surprised Amanda would be when I walked in looking elegant and appropriate. How her parents might finally see me as good enough for their son. I should have checked the weather forecast. Saturday morning. I woke up to ice hitting my windows. A message on my phone warned that the roads were dangerous. My hair appointment got cancelled because the salon lost electricity. The place where I was supposed to pick up my dress was closed because their street was flooded. By noon. I was sitting in my bathrobe, watching ice cover everything outside, wondering if the party would even happen. David called at 12:30. Mum, are you still coming? The roads are really bad. I could hear Amanda in the background. Tell her the party is still happening. Everyone is already here. Everyone except me. I was the only person who had to drive through the bad weather to get there. I'll be there, I told David. I wouldn't miss it. Without anyone to help me, I did my own hair and makeup. My hands shook a little as I put on lipstick. The red dress fit perfectly, and for a moment, I looked in the mirror and felt elegant. Then I saw my old winter coat hanging by the door. It was the only one I owned, and it definitely didn't match my fancy dress. But it was too cold to go without it. I left my apartment at 1:30 p.m., giving myself extra time to drive carefully. The roads were slippery, but okay if you drove slowly. Everything was going fine until I got close to Amanda's family house. That's when I saw her. An old woman was standing next to a fancy car with the hood open. She was wearing an expensive-looking coat but no hat. Ice was forming on her grey hair. I could have just driven past. The smart thing would have been to call for help on my phone and keep going to the party. I was already late, and stopping would make me even later. But I couldn't leave an elderly woman alone in dangerous weather. Not even if it meant showing up to the most important event of my life looking messy. I pulled over and rolled down my window. Do you need help? The woman turned around. She was probably in her late 70s with a face that showed she had been beautiful her whole life. Her blue eyes were sharp and alert, not confused like I expected. My car won't start, she said calmly. The engine just died. I should have just called someone and left. But something about the way she stood there with dignity reminded me of my own mother. Let me take a look, I heard myself say. Getting out of my car meant giving up any hope of arriving at the party looking nice. The freezing rain soaked through my coat immediately. I could feel my carefully styled hair getting wet and messy. The woman watched as I looked at her engine. I wasn't a car mechanic, but my husband had taught me basic car fixes before he died. Your battery terminals are corroded, I called out. Do you have any cola in the car? She looked at me like I was crazy. Cola? Coca-Cola works great for cleaning battery corrosion. It's an emergency trick my husband taught me. She opened her car and pulled out a small bottle of Coke from her expensive handbag. As I poured the cola over the battery, I knew how silly this must look. 2 women in fancy clothes fixing a car in an ice storm. You're going to ruin your dress, she said. Already am, I replied, scraping off the corrosion with my car key. Sometimes you just have to help people instead of worrying about staying clean. While we waited for the cola to work, she asked where I was going. To a Christmas party, I said. My son's in-laws. Very formal. And you stopped to help a stranger. I shrugged. Couldn't leave you alone out here. Family events happen every year, but leaving someone in danger would bother me forever. Something changed in her face when I said that. She looked at me differently, like she approved of me. Try starting it now, I said. The engine started smoothly. She smiled. The first real warmth I'd seen from her. You're very kind. Not many people would have stopped, especially when dressed for a party. I looked down at my outfit. My coat was soaked. My dress had grease stains on it. My hair was plastered to my head. The elegant woman I had been an hour ago was gone. Well, I can't show up to this party looking like this, I said, trying to laugh. Maybe I should just go home. Nonsense, she said firmly. Anyone worth knowing will understand that you helped someone, instead of worrying about how you look. And if they don't understand that, they're not worth knowing. She reached into her purse and handed me a business card with fancy lettering on it. Eleanor Whitman. It said. My heart stopped. You're Amanda's grandmother, I whispered. Her blue eyes, so much like Amanda's but much warmer, held something that looked like satisfaction. I am. And you must be Margaret, David's mother. She paused. I've been very curious to meet the woman who raised such a good man. My mind was racing. This was Eleanor Whitman, the woman Amanda talked about. The one who supposedly let others make all the business decisions. The one who stayed quiet during family matters. I had no idea, I stammered. I'm quite sure you didn't, she said, and her tone had layers of meaning I couldn't understand. Shall we go to the party together? I think you'll find it more interesting than you expected.